Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here for episode 5 of the mini-series on how to have a good day in uncertain times. It's a delight to be with you again. And today I'm going to be talking about the topic of how to steady your nerves by reframing them for those moments when you're feeling a little stressed or stretched and you can feel it, that sensation in yourself. What is it there that you can do to get yourself back to a sense of being centered and calm and steady in the middle of what you're doing? And as we are settling in, let me just put up something to help us check in. I'd like to know how you're doing today, where are you joining from, and how do you feel on the Chihuahua scale? How do you feel on the Chihuahua scale, which is very obviously scientifically robust assessment scale that's used in organizations around the world. I would say, Chihuahua number 3, perhaps with a little bit of a dose of 4, because I'm excited to be here with you. The situation I'm going to talk about today is probably more about the situations where we are feeling a little bit more like maybe 4, number 4, with that sort of maybe 9 with that or maybe even 2, where we're really sort of I was going to say rabbit in headlights, but this is obviously Chihuahua in headlights. It's wonderful seeing all the comments coming through. That's wonderful. It's a nice range of 3, 4, and 7. Okay, so we're all in the same place. So let's talk then about what happens when we are Chihuahua number 2, or perhaps Chihuahua number 9, or Chihuahua number 4. Let's talk about what we can do when we are feeling a bit stretched and out of our comfort zone and something is making us feel tense. I'm going to talk about the science of how to steady your nerves by reframing them. And this is a neat technique that is the sort of thing I love because it's very fast and it's very evidence-based. And it also tells us something quite profound about the way that our brains work. And I'm going to center this on talking about 2 things which are perhaps obvious to you, perhaps not though, because they're actually in some ways somewhat counterintuitive, and they do explain why this process that I'm about to lay out, why this technique works so well. First one is that stress hormones are helpful in moderation. And the second is that emotions aren't just reflexes, which we can't do anything about. They're actually constructed by our brain based on context that we perceive. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about both of those to explain how we can use those facts in order to keep ourselves calm and centered when we're feeling stressed and nervy. So let me talk about the first one. And you may know some of this. You know that our stress levels vary. They vary actually across the day. They vary across days and weeks and months and years. And we have a system in our bodies and our brain which is designed to cope with things that seem like they're stressing us. And by stress, I mean that in a quite broad sense. Anything which pushes us against the boundaries of what we feel comfortable with. And that could be physical stress, it could be mental stress. And so we have a system which is designed to respond quickly to anything that we encounter that could be a potential source of stress. And the acute response, that means the immediate response, centers on 2 stress hormones or neurotransmitters. They're both hormones and neurotransmitters, called adrenaline and noradrenaline. You might also see them named as epinephrine and norepinephrine, but it's the same thing that we're talking about: adrenaline and noradrenaline. And these are designed to help us respond effectively to whatever is coming towards us that requires us to step up to a challenge or an opportunity. And both of those hormones, both adrenaline and noradrenaline, help to get us physically ready. In different ways. Actually, they have slightly different roles. They have also quite overlapping roles. Where they overlap is that both adrenaline and noradrenaline will raise our heart rate and our blood pressure and our blood sugar as well, so that we have the energy that is needed in the heat of that moment. Because remember, it's not just our bodies that need glucose, it's also our brain. So we have blood sugar also rising, and there are also some other clever things that, for example, noradrenaline is responsible for redirecting some of the blood flow away from the peripheral parts of our body that don't need it to muscles that might be more likely to need it. Of course, one of the things that's especially useful for us to know is that noradrenaline and adrenaline play a big part in getting us mentally ready for a challenge as well. They're not just for physical readiness. And mental readiness in this case means, for example, noradrenaline is well known for being responsible for sharpening our focus and attention. And it's been found in clinical depression to often be at a very low level. And if we don't have high levels of noradrenaline, high enough levels of noradrenaline, then we feel sluggish and unfocused. And noradrenaline, therefore, is released throughout our body and our brain the whole time, at different levels across the sleep-wake cycle. But it's there all the time. It increases in the face of a challenge. Adrenaline is released only in times of challenge. And one of the ways that it helps us mentally is that it widens the airways in our lungs, which allows us to take in more oxygen with each breath, which increases the blood oxygen levels, which increases our alertness. So stress hormones are very helpful at moderate levels. We need it in order to be sharp, on our game, focused and alert, and ready to roll with whatever is coming towards us. Now the question is, where does that then start to become the stress response that we are perhaps more familiar with? And it's essentially a continuum. There's no bright line. It's just that after a certain point, when adrenaline and noradrenaline get too high, that's when we start to have that sensation, that feeling of unpleasantness, or at least we call it unpleasant because we're associating it with unpleasant experiences. That's when we start to feel perhaps a bit jittery, a bit tense, the muscles tight. Maybe we feel that in our chest, maybe somewhere else in our body. We also have narrowed vision and actually narrowed hearing as well. Why? Because we're trying to stay focused on whatever the big challenge is that's in front of us. So at higher levels, those stress hormones, that's when we start to think of these quantities of adrenaline and noradrenaline perhaps not being so helpful to us as we're trying to perform at our best. Now, as some of you may know, that's not all that happens with the stress response, because we also then have this second line response, which goes through a different axis. It goes through something called the HPA axis, and that's the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, adrenal gland route. And the signals that get sent from the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland to the adrenal gland result in the creation of cortisol. And cortisol has a different function in this whole stress response. What it does is it takes a little longer to kick in, but once it does, then it keeps your stress response revved and locked at a higher level for a longer period. And then it takes time for those stress hormones to drop back to your baseline levels. So that's the stress response. And it's interesting because, as I say, some of it's good, some of it we need, and some of it is a great signal to us that we're focused, alert, and paying attention in the right way. And it's also interesting that this response is called arousal. Now, no sniggers. I know that we use the word arousal mostly to talk about sexual arousal in common parlance, but actually scientists use the word arousal to describe all of what I've just been talking about, that initial stress response of adrenaline and noradrenaline to whatever is incoming as potential challenge or opportunity. And here's this woman peering at her screen. Hard to say. Is she excited? Is she stressed? Is she worried? Is she feeling a tremendous amount of anticipation? Is she just delighted by what she's seeing? The thing is, when you actually look at pictures of human reactions, they're quite similar. If there's a sense of arousal, our physical demeanor doesn't look all that different, whether the incoming threat is a real threat or whether it's an incoming opportunity, and it's very exciting. Now, this starts to give us a bit of an opportunity because we do actually have quite a bit of room to decide what those initial signals of arousal are telling us. Because we've often grown up, I think, with an idea that, you know, our responses of fear are quite primal, and that if you have something that is going to create fear in you, that there's just a very firm fingerprint of that fear in your brain, and there's just nothing you can do about it. Actually, that is not what research over the last 10 years has started to show us. It started to show us that we have that initial sensory response. It's an alert for sure, because it's your brain picking up that there's something that needs to be reacted to, and something that requires a response from you. Then what happens is that your brain says, okay, well, how do I interpret this arousal? How do I interpret this sensory data that you're hopped up? What does that mean? Now, that takes a moment. And so, you know, if there's a car that's speeding towards us, luckily, what's great about this whole system that we have is that the response can be so quick that we can jump out of the way before we've done the kind of careful, well, hold on, you know, what is really going on here? So the initial response is fast. But there is then this interpretation that we can go through, which is to say, brain notices signals of arousal, sensory data is there. Brain thinks, okay, so how do I interpret this? What is the emotion that I should construct for you in this moment to act as an interpretation of what's going on? To do that, two things: look at past experience and see what past experience tells us. So, for example, if you've seen a lot of snakes recently, then it may well be that you see this rope on the ground, that it registers as quite likely to be a snake. On the other hand, if you've never seen a snake, then less likely to be interpreted as a snake. Or you might have watched a documentary recently, and it might have been a nature documentary, and so that image is in your mind, and so that gets retrieved very quickly, and your brain says, oh, probably a snake. But then your brain also thinks about context, and thinks about how likely is it that as you're walking down your street, wherever you are around the world, how likely is it that this is actually a snake? And then at that point, your brain might say, actually, this is a rope. It's unlikely to be a snake on this delightful London street outside my window. It's probably quite likely to be a rope. And then the emotion that we create in our minds goes very quickly from fear to relief and perhaps a little bit of embarrassment. So we have this opportunity to say, all right, I'm noticing that I am having a reaction to something, and I'm feeling something in my body. Maybe my hands are feeling a little bit clammy. Maybe I'm noticing my voice go a little high or my voice go low, or there's some change in the way that I feel physically, and I can tell that I'm reacting. I can tell that my stress hormones are rising. But there's a moment before they get too high and before the cortisol reaction kicks in, when you have this opportunity to say, okay, well, what is the context that I want to match this sensation to? And you can choose in that moment to notice the nervy sensation and choose, instead of matching it to fear, to match it to anticipation and excitement and readiness. Because remember, that's what those hormones are doing for us. They're getting us ready. They're getting us alert and sharp and ready for the challenge. So I'm curious to know what kind of sensations would give you a feeling that you were in that space where you could make a choice, where you could decide what might be going on and how you might choose to interpret it. I'm curious to know in the comments what sorts of situations create it, and how you know. What would be your early warning signs? So I'll wait a little bit to see what's coming through there. It is really interesting how different it is, because we have this quite similar physical reaction that's happening inside our bodies and indeed in our brains. But the way that we can tune into it as people differs from one person to another. I know that I actually thought that the sweaty palm sensation was actually not, something that you could really measure for yourself or test for yourself. But I've come across lots of people who say, no, actually, that is a good thing for me to notice. For me, I will say that it's a little classic, that feeling of flutteriness in the top of my abdomen. I get that sort of slight feeling of tension there that tells me, oh, there's some anticipation going on here. And if I think about myself, the situations that tend to bring this out, you might find, this resonates with your experience, when you're about to say go live on a video and you're about to talk to a bunch of people out there, and perhaps you put together some new ideas and you're trying to test them out. And I will say for myself, I am definitely one of those people who is more comfortable than average in speaking. When I was 16, 17, I was editor of my college yearbook, and it involved me standing up each morning in assembly and often making a lot of announcements. And I noticed actually I felt okay with that. That wasn't too stressful for me. And then at university, I was co-chair of a debating club. It was really a sort of a comedy debating club called the Milton Society. And again, I was okay with that. I was actually able to do that. And I used to write my index cards and so on. And I think to the outside world, it would look like I just had no issue whatsoever. I mean, I've chosen a life where I do a lot of speaking, and I love it. I really do. I love that feeling of connecting with a large audience. But it's also true to say that none of that means that I don't get that sense of anticipation, that sense of slight nerviness. And it usually happens somewhere between about half an hour and 10 minutes before. And it's quite it's just a very interesting sensation. And now, when I encounter it, what I do is I say, aha, this is my brain and body getting me ready to rise to the challenge. And it's enough for me to reframe that nervy sensation. Maybe I take a deep breath, knowing that that will help to drop the stress hormones a little further. And that allows me to say to myself, oh, how exciting. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to getting in front of an audience, whether it's an audience of 9,000 people or an audience that's a bit more intimate like today. Aha, this is my brain and body getting me ready to rise to the challenge. And of course, it's useful in all sorts of situations where you notice that you're starting to feel tense, and you can feel that. It could be that you're in a difficult situation. At work, it could be that you're in a difficult situation as you're trying to navigate some issues with schooling and your family. So it's a good thing to have in your back pocket, knowing that it's not going to make the sensations go away, but it is going to change your emotional reaction to that. And ultimately, our emotions are how we feel about the world. And so there is, a lot of power in understanding that it's more malleable than we think, our emotional state. And artists and writers have known this, of course, in many ways for many years. There's a famous quote from Hamlet, from Shakespeare's Hamlet, that I like to go back to, which is, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. I will say that in order to do this, of course, it really helps to get to know yourself. I'm just going to take that alert there. It really helps to know yourself. It really helps to tune into, well, what are my early warning signs? How do I know what is going on in my body? And to get better at spotting it as quickly as you can. And then to have a little bit of a phrase that you can go to. You can borrow mine if you like, which is the aha, this is my brain and body getting me ready to rise to a challenge. So as ever, this handout is available in the usual place at carolinewebb.co/live. Please head on over there if you haven't already, and you'll be able to download this. Now let me have a look at some of your comments. I'd like to see what you're saying. Right, oh gosh, so much good stuff here. How fantastic. How fantastic. All right, so Jeff is saying early warning signs, so increased heart rate, tightening of chest, more catastrophic thinking. I like that a lot because you know, the physical symptoms you can spot, it's true, but sometimes it helps to have a few things that you're looking out for, and your habit of mind and noticing that there is a particular thing that you start saying to yourself, that is a very good first sign too. For a lot of people, noticing that you're saying never or always, or you're becoming very absolute in your language, is a good tell as well. So thank you, Jeff. More catastrophic thinking. That's and on the other hand, how interesting. So Eduardo says, actually, his response is a desire to postpone, to procrastinate. Very interesting, which is, you know, when you think back to our immediate response being the fight, flight, or freeze response, there are any number of different things that we might see in ourselves. So I love that you're clear on that. Again, that's a sort of inner game, that's sort of noticing in yourself that there's a thing that you're saying to yourself, an instinct there. Adrienne saying, my tell is pulling body inward, everything tightening. Yes, that's right. That's great to be able to tap into that. And others are saying similar things. Tight chest, slight tightness in my chest. Clara is also saying fluttery stomach. Jane is saying shaking, so actually noticing that feeling, which is very much part of adrenaline rising to a higher level. Oh, and that's interesting. So, right, so Carlos Eduardo is saying reflux, when he feels nervous, starts to feel the burning. That's really interesting. Some of you might actually have that and not have tuned into that before, because that's absolutely right. One of the things that your brain is going to do, your brain and your body is going to do when you're feeling stressed, is to say, actually, now is not the time to work super hard on digesting your food. So that is going to manifest itself in indigestion for some of us. And that is a really nice thing to tap into. Now, let's have a look. Let's see what else have we got here. Marek says, I used to liken the feeling to walking out on the football pitch. Yes. How interesting. So Marek is saying that if he didn't feel that sense of anticipation, that it might sometimes mean that it was a subpar performance that was going to follow. And that's a really wonderful thing to be able to tap into your mind, to know that actually if you don't have any of that as you're about to do something, which, you know, perhaps is a bit of a performance, maybe you're, you know, giving a presentation in a meeting, then actually, you know, that's your body perhaps not being ready. So that is a wonderful example to go to in your mind. I love that. I love that. I will save that. And I like the framing of go out there and have fun too. So think about what's your go out there and have fun sentence. What is your way of saying that I'm ready, that I'm up for it, and this is what this is telling me. Notice the situations that tend to bring it out. You know, Alison is mentioning that public speaking, we know it's public speaking, not public spreading and speak wrong, is a classic one, absolutely. And breathing and knowing that it's going to help you in the heat of the moment to shift anxiety into excitement. So thank you. These are wonderful, wonderful examples. I will save all of them, even if I wasn't able to put them on screen. And I'm just going to just tidy this up and put us back over here. So there we are. And I think if you would like to read more about this question of emotions as a construct, then I would strongly recommend you read Lisa Feldman Barrett's book on how emotions are made. I think it's a very empowering book, but also, you know, some of the best science I've read for a very long time. So you might follow up on that. And of course, as ever, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear more of your stories and examples. And so please, you know, feel free to drop me a line. And as ever, you can get all of the materials to support this, including a little segment in the book, which is specifically about this topic, as well as the one-page handout that I just showed you. Please come on over there. One thing I will say is that this is a mini series, as I've mentioned a few times. So this is actually episode 5 of 6. So next week is going to be the last one for a little while. I'm not ending the How to Have a Good Day in Uncertain Times series overall. I'm going to take a break though, so that I can think about what happens next and what topics you might like to cover. So one thing I would say is, you know, please feel free to drop me a line and tell me what you'd be interested in me talking about next time when I start up again a bit later in the spring. What kinds of issues around uncertainty and upheaval would you be interested in hearing more about? I'd love to hear. So thank you very much for everything today. It's been wonderful to spend time with you, and I wish you all a wonderful second half of the week. Bye for now.